Under the scorching sun of a vast and unfamiliar world, the sky stretches out in a deceptively peaceful blue. That peace is instantly shattered by the terrifying roar of a hydreigon, paralyzing the slave soldiers below with primal fear. Despite their terror, the men are forced to raise their spears, clashing their weapons in a desperate attempt to intimidate the beast. But the battlefield is a chaotic slaughterhouse, and in the confusion of blood and dust, a soldier is ruthlessly struck down. Amidst the carnage, one lone warrior moves with lethal precision, bringing his blade down on a fallen foe with devastating force. His brutality terrifies even his own allies, who recoil in horror and scream insults at the monster fighting among them. Yet the warrior stands alone, his body trembling uncontrollably from the sheer physical exhaustion of the slaughter. Sensing his weakness, the enemy horde surges forward, screaming for blood to overwhelm the solitary fighter. Bloodied and gasping for air, he looks up with fading vision, his strength draining away with every ragged breath. Pushed beyond his limit, his body finally gives out, sending him plummeting helplessly towards the chaotic fray below. As he falls, a cascade of holographic system messages heralds the awakening of legendary hidden traits within him. Empowered by these unseen forces, he defies death, crashing into the enemy ranks with a renewed and terrifying fury. A primal scream rips from his throat as he unleashes a final, desperate burst of energy to survive the onslaught. But that vivid, bloody nightmare fades, revealing a lonely figure sitting in the darkness of a messy, modern room. The screen before him flashes a cruel game over, marking the bitter end of another digital life. Park Hyun-myung throws his head back in frustration, mocking the irony of his name, which was meant to signify a wise life. His entire existence is confined to this cluttered box, a life wasting away in the blue glow of a monitor. For 5 long years, he has dedicated every waking moment to a singular obsessive pursuit, ignoring the world outside. He considers himself a legend, not of reality, but of the virtual realm he clings to with desperate tenacity. The object of his obsession is Pangenia, a game that exploded in popularity 5 years ago before vanishing into obscurity. Promising a wish to anyone who clears it, the game instead crushed players with its sadistic, unforgiving difficulty. Now, the servers are a graveyard, and he stands as the sole survivor, the only active player remaining in a dead world. Memories of angry forums and rage-quitting players flash through his mind, a testament to the game's cruelty. They faced bosses designed to be unbeatable, monstrosities that mocked any attempt at victory with instant death. Worse still was the lore that pitted players against invincible NPCs, ensuring that a single mistake meant total character deletion. In Pangenia, death is absolute, erasing hours of progress and beloved characters in a heartbreaking instant. Just like the cigarettes piling up in his overflowing ashtray, the game's community burned out and faded away long ago. It feels as though an invisible hand is actively preventing anyone from ever reaching the end, yet he remains. He recalls his latest failure, a character laden with rare artifacts now lost to the void forever. The weight of 5 wasted years settles heavily on his shoulders, creating a hollow feeling of loss and futility. Suddenly, something on the screen catches his eye, breaking his melancholy trance with a surprising notification. A staggering message reveals that his character's death has yielded an astronomical amount of soul points. He stares in disbelief, realizing this payout dwarfs anything he has earned from deleting hundreds of characters previously. The game's ruthless system converts the value of a fallen hero directly into currency for the next life. These points are the key to power, allowing players to purchase talents and accelerate their growth from the very start. He remembers a past warrior who died with the title of Master of Swordsmanship, a mere fraction of his current potential. With 1.6 million points, the limitations of the past dissolve, allowing him to maximize every conceivable stat. Usually cautious, he would opt for safe magic talents, but today, caution is thrown to the wind. Driven by a reckless impulse, he clicks the random button, surrendering his fate entirely to the algorithm. Accepting that victory is impossible, he decides to create one final masterpiece to enjoy before quitting forever. With a firm press of his thumb, he locks in his decision, unaware that this click will change his destiny. His mind drifts to the painful memory of a coffee shop meeting that shattered his real-world heart. He recalls the confusion he felt as the woman he loved began to tear their relationship apart with cold logic. Her words cut deeper than any game over, condemning his lack of ambition and his stagnant future. The cold reality of adulthood and marriage expectations stared him down from her unyielding, disappointed gaze. Stunned into silence, he had no defense against the brutal truth of his own mediocrity. She compared him to successful peers, twisting the knife of his inadequacy even deeper with every word. Her disappointment was palpable, a silent accusation that he was the only one falling behind in the race of life. Shame consumed him, forcing his gaze downward as his world crumbled around him in that quiet cafe. With a final, dismissive sigh, she ended their 5 years together and walked out of his life. Her parting wish for him to live well rang hollow against the darkness rising within him. He was left alone in the cold light of the cafe, a solitary figure abandoned by reality. That brutal rejection severed his last tie to the real world, leaving him adrift and broken. Fueled by spite and despair, he quit his dead-end job to retreat fully into his digital sanctuary. Now, staring at his screen, he vows to shed his pathetic self and embrace the power he has accumulated. He begins the sequence, burning through points to enhance his character's very essence with blinding speed. A sudden flash reflects in his glasses as the system acknowledges a rare and secret combination of traits. He pauses, his gamer instincts tingling as an unfamiliar prompt interrupts the process. The screen displays a bizarre invitation, congratulating him on meeting the requirements for a singularity. Before he can react, the digital world erupts into reality, pulling him physically into the monitor. Panic sets in as the boundary between worlds dissolves, engulfing him in a blinding crimson light. A monstrous entity roars in the void, promising destruction, and burning with a terrifying, divine wrath. An agonizing headache splits his skull, forcing him to his knees as his consciousness is rewritten. Reality warps around him, accompanied by a voice that seems to echo from within his own soul. The voice pierces through the pain, alien yet undeniably present within his mind. His body collapses onto the floor of his room, the physical toll of the connection knocking him unconscious. As he lies motionless, his computer monitor pulses with an ominous, rhythmic energy in the dark room. The screen displays a cryptic prophecy, speaking of a being standing at the vortex of creation and destruction. A final, chilling message wishes him happiness in the hell he is about to enter. Consciousness returns with the sharp pain of a boot to the ribs, snapping him awake in a dusty nightmare. A ruthless overseer towers over him, threatening to feed him to the beasts if he doesn't stand immediately. The mention of the Hydreigon freezes his blood, a name he knows all too well from the game. The whip cracks through the air, missing him by inches, but his attention is fixed on the horizon. There, looming in the distance, are the multi-headed horrors he has slain thousands of times, shaking him to his core. A fellow slave shoves him back into line, desperate to avoid collective punishment from their captors. But he remains grounded, his mind racing to process the impossible transition from his room to this desert hell. A low growl escapes his throat as confusion gives way to a sharp, analytical focus. The details are unmistakable. The texture of the scales, the heat of the sun, this is definitely Pangenia. Even the desolate ruins in the background match the geography he memorized over 5 years of gameplay. As if answering his realization, a holographic status window materializes in thin air before him. His eyes widen as he begins to understand the terrifying implication of the interface. The text confirms the impossible. His stats are maxed at 12, and the list of active hidden traits is endless. He stands amidst the slave army, accepting the surreal truth that he has physically entered the game world. The interface is not a hallucination. It is the absolute anchor proving his new reality. He scrutinizes the numbers, knowing that starting stats of 12 defy the fundamental rules of the game. Even more shocking is the battery of 13 legendary traits, a godlike arsenal for a level 1 character. His analysis is cut short as the earth beneath his feet begins to tremble violently. He looks up, sensing a disturbance far greater than the whip-wielding overseers nearby. Around him, the veteran slaves freeze, their faces drained of color as they recognize the vibration. A massive cloud of dust rises on the horizon, signaling the approach of a devastating force. Screams erupt as the Desert Queen's army breaks the truce, charging in atop massive hydras. At their helm stands the Snake Princess, radiating a lethal aura as she commands her beasts to attack. Park Hyun-myung stares, caught off guard by the sudden and brutal escalation of the battlefield. He recognizes the NPC immediately, a high-level threat he has encountered countless times in the lore. A sudden chime pierces the din of battle, announcing the generation of a main quest. He gazes at the floating blue prompt, which now dictates the terms of his existence. The objective is simple yet horrifying: survive or suffer death in both the game and the real world. The weight of the penalty hits him, triggering a primal spike of adrenaline and fear. The sky suddenly darkens as a volley of black arrows descends upon the defenseless slaves. Chaos consumes the ranks as men fall screaming, pierced by the deadly rain of steel. While others scramble and die, he stands rooted to the spot, watching the carnage unfold around him. His mind momentarily goes blank, the visceral reality of death overwhelming his gamer instincts. Suddenly, a cool blue energy envelops him, signifying the activation of the heart of the iron-blooded monarch. His panic evaporates instantly, replaced by an unnatural calm that forces him to accept the situation. With icy clarity, he spots a discarded sword and realizes that inaction means certain death. He moves with sudden purpose, diving past a falling comrade to seize the weapon. His fingers wrap around the hilt, the familiar weight of steel feeling like an extension of his arm. As he rises, the blade hums with power, responding to the latent energy hidden within him. He swings effortlessly, intercepting a lethal strike from a panicked overseer with perfect timing. The counterattack is swift and decisive, cleaving through his opponent in a blur of motion. Blood sprays across the sand, but he feels no hesitation, only the cold efficiency of a machine. He falls into a combat stance, his eyes glowing with the blue light of his awakened power. The system chimes again, confirming that Weapon Master is now fully active and guiding his hand. Park Hyun-myung is no longer a gamer, he is a warrior born of code and blood, ready to conquer this hell. The slavers, seeing a lone target amidst the chaos, descend upon him with insults and lethal intent. However, the battlefield has shifted, and their heavy weapons strike nothing but the empty air where he stood a split second before. With the reflexes of a seasoned warrior, he weaves through the deadly reach of a spear, barely dodging the razor-sharp tip. As his fingers wrap around the shaft of the enemy's weapon, a strange sensation of familiarity floods his muscles, despite it being his first time wielding it. Empowered by his hidden traits, he executes a flawless counterattack, driving the stolen spear through his attacker with the precision of a grandmaster. His movements are so fast and brutal that they ignite a panic among the slavers, their screams echoing over the clash of steel. He moves like a phantom, his body twisting and striking with a fluidity that defies the limits of a novice fighter. Even amidst the adrenaline, he looks up in shock, unable to comprehend how his body is performing feats he only ever commanded through a keyboard. There is no time for introspection as he plunges back into the fray, parrying a lethal strike that would have decapitated a lesser man. Through the haze of battle, his observation trait activates, allowing him to visualize the flow of mana within his enemy's body. A system message flares in his mind, confirming that he can now predict the trajectory of every incoming attack before it even begins. Armed with this foresight, he dances through the melee, the enemy's blade passing harmlessly through the space he just occupied. He retaliates with a crushing blow, the sheer force of the impact shattering the enemy's guard and resolving the duel instantly. Seamlessly switching tactics, he snatches a battle axe from the air, his Weapon Master trait instantly adapting his stance to the new weight. With a savage downward swing, he crushes the defense of the next attacker, displaying a terrifying mastery over every tool of war. The slavers recoil in horror as their comrades are sent flying, realizing too late that they are not fighting a slave, but a monster. Yet, as the immediate threat recedes, the physical reality of his exertion crashes down on him, leaving him gasping for air. Sweat pours down his face as the adrenaline fades, replaced by the crushing weight of fatigue from a body pushed beyond its limits. The remaining slavers hesitate, fear etched on their faces as they witness a single man holding the line against their squad. A blue holographic window materializes, informing him that his weapon proficiency is skyrocketing at an unnatural pace thanks to his masterful hands. He stares at the interface in disbelief, realizing his skill level has already reached 6, a milestone that usually takes players weeks to achieve. Looking at his trembling hand, he understands that while his skills are legendary, his physical stamina is rapidly failing him. Despair begins to set in as he gazes at the horizon, realizing that hundreds of enemies still remain and survival seems mathematically impossible. Far away from the dusty battlefield, the scene shifts to the ominous red glow of a throne room where dark figures stand in silence. The Desert Queen lounges on her throne, her voice dripping with dangerous disappointment as she addresses the failure of her expedition. Her gaze falls upon a kneeling figure, her red eye glowing with a menacing light as she questions the loyalty of her subordinate. The snake princess, Isabella, keeps her head bowed low, unable to meet the queen's gaze due to the shame of her position. The queen reveals her true political motive, fearing that the failure of the expedition will be blamed on her city if any witnesses survive. With a cruel command, she orders Isabella to the Kaltzman Desert to slaughter every last straggler and erase their shame. As Isabella departs on her giant mount, the queen's final order echoes in the darkness: leave no evidence behind. But before she leaves, the queen dangles a desperate hope before her, promising to lift the curse if this mission is a success. Isabella's face tightens with a mix of humiliation and hope as she accepts the mission, bound by her desire for freedom. The queen's warning lingers in the crimson-lit hall, a reminder that failure will result in a fate far worse than death. Back under the open sky, Isabella stands atop her hydra, the wind whipping through her hair as she contemplates her grim task. Her sharp eyes scan the carnage below, and she spots the lone slave who is inexplicably still breathing amidst the dead. From the slave's perspective, she is a terrifying silhouette against the sun, standing atop a mountain of muscle and scales. Isabella narrows her eyes, intrigued and annoyed that a mere slave has managed to survive the initial slaughter. Park Hyun-myung leans heavily on his sword, using it as a crutch to keep himself upright as the adrenaline completely evaporates. His vision blurs with exhaustion, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he struggles to maintain consciousness. Suddenly, a miraculous chime rings out, and a system message announces that his health and mana have been fully restored. Energy floods back into his limbs, washing away the fatigue and leaving him standing tall and revitalized, ready for round 2. The slavers, unaware of his recovery, charge forward with renewed confidence, eager to finish off the exhausted prey. But their charge is cut short as a massive shadow falls over them, followed by the crushing weight of the Hydra's tail obliterating their ranks. Park Hyun-myung looks up in awe and terror, realizing that the true boss of this area has finally descended. Isabella stands tall on a rock formation, radiating an aura of overwhelming power that freezes the blood of everyone present. His great sage trait attempts to analyze her, but the system returns only error messages, overwhelmed by the level gap and her unique status. Sweat beads on his forehead as he confirms she is level 8, a number that spells absolute doom for a beginner character. In the lore of Pangenia, the gap between levels is exponential, and anyone above level 7 is considered a force of nature. Level 8 entities are the apex predators, equivalent to the guild masters and final bosses that require entire raid teams to defeat. Standing alone against such a being is not a battle, it is a natural disaster waiting to consume him. The glitching status window reveals a critical clue. She is afflicted by a status ailment tied to the curse of the Desert Queen. His eyes widen as his gamer brain connects the dots, realizing this lore detail might be his only lifeline. Isabella stares down at him with cold indifference, acknowledging his skill but deeming it irrelevant in the face of her mission. A terrifying, suffocating aura of killing intent erupts from her body, manifesting as a spectral snake behind her. He barely has time to register the threat before she vanishes from her position, moving faster than his eyes can track. In a heartbeat, she closes the distance, her blade drawn and poised to sever his head from his shoulders. The strike is instantaneous, a blur of motion that carries the weight of certain death. Yet in that fraction of a second, instead of defending, a confident smirk spreads across Park Hyun-myung's face. He doesn't block with his sword but with words, shouting a question that freezes her blade inches from his skin. The shockwave of her halted strike blows his hair back, the sharp edge of her weapon pressing lightly against his throat. Isabella freezes, her eyes wide with shock, her composure shattered by the specific knowledge he just revealed. The tension is palpable as she stares into his eyes, the murderous intent replaced by a desperate, wavering curiosity. He calmly recites the hidden lore of her character, claiming to be a star-bearer who can read the destiny of the stars. With absolute conviction, he offers her the one thing she desires more than anything: a way to break the queen's curse. The mention of lifting the curse hits her like a physical blow, her pupils dilating as hope wars with suspicion. Slowly, the tension leaves her posture and she sheathes her weapon, proving that his gamble has paid off. Internally, he reveals the truth. The Star-Bearer is a specific NPC class required to transcend the game's level cap. The lore dictates that to remove the queen's curse, she specifically needs the blessing of stars from such a character. He watches her closely, seeing the slight tremble in her shoulders as she struggles with the overwhelming desire for freedom. He knows he has won. Her desperation to escape the queen's control makes her vulnerable to his manipulation. Seeing her standing there, he feels a strange sense of pride and pity, knowing he is the one who designed her character. Isabella was a tragic figure in the game, a character he created, but had to abandon due to starting in a different region. She was meant to be a protagonist, a character designed to travel the world and witness the game's ending. Instead, she was left to rot in this desert, a bird trapped in a cage by a cruel narrative device he helped write. Breaking the silence, she asks for his name, her voice softening as she begins to view him as a savior rather than prey. He adopts the persona of Randolph, a name that sounds fitting for the mysterious role he has invented. Isabella turns away, her red cape swirling as she announces that his execution is postponed, giving him a temporary reprieve. However, she glances back with a glare, warning him that deception will be met with a fate worse than simple death. Her threat is graphic and sincere, promising to rip him apart if he fails to deliver on his promise. She commands her troops to treat him as an honored guest, instantly changing his status from slave to VIP. A blue system message flashes, confirming the completion of Main Quest 1, Survival. A cascade of notifications floods his vision as the constellation of fortune and battle shower him with rewards for his miraculous survival. The adrenaline finally leaves him completely, and he collapses to the ground, the sheer absurdity of his survival catching up to him. Another notification informs him that his score is so high it will be recorded in the Global Hall of Fame. Time passes, and the scene shifts to the cool, moonlit towers of Isabella's palace, a stark contrast to the bloody battlefield. Relaxing in a luxurious bath, he reviews his loot, which includes the legendary Sword of Michela and the Soul of the High Dragon. He marvels at his luck, noting that the Soul is an ultra-rare drop that only appeared once in the entire history of the game. But the most mysterious item is the broken piece of the Golden Scale, which offers a cryptic ability to synchronize reality and Pangea. His solitude is interrupted as the bathhouse doors burst open, revealing 3 scantily clad maids ready to attend to him. They offer to wash him with cheerful smiles, a standard service for an honored guest, but a terrifying trap for him. Panicking, he awkwardly asks them to only wash his feet, trying to minimize contact and maintain his aloof persona. As they scrub his feet, he feels the physical sensation of their touch, a stark reminder of how real this digital world has become. He notices the maids exchanging glances and his paranoia spikes. They are Isabella's spies, testing his star-bearer claim. He closes his eyes and forces himself to remain stoic, knowing that a true star-bearer possesses no worldly desires. One of the maids gasps, her eyes widening as she notices something unusual, sending a jolt of fear through him. To his relief, she is staring at a glowing blue status window that has suddenly materialized between them. He looks at the screen, confused by the sudden intrusion of the system UI. It displays the Hall of Fame ranking, but more disturbingly, a countdown for the breakdown of Pangea. He scans the list of names, realizing with a shock that he recognizes the other players ranked below him. The system announces that because he ranked in the survival quest, he has unlocked the logout feature. His internal monologue is cut short as the maid asks about the star-bearer, dangerously close to exposing his distraction. He snaps his head around, eyes wide, realizing he almost broke character in his shock. His mind races back to his old guildmates, Gracia and Mint Chocolate, realizing they too have been summoned to this hell. A steely determination fills his eyes. The presence of the logout button changes everything. A warning flashes, stating that his character will remain vulnerable in the game world while he is logged out. Ignoring the risk, pure joy floods his system as he realizes he has a way out of this nightmare. He abruptly stands up, splashing water and ordering the startled maids to leave immediately so he can communicate with the stars. When they hesitate, he uses Isabella's authority, threatening that his power will fail if he is disturbed. The maid looks confused and skeptical, clearly doubting the validity of his sudden demand. However, fear of the princess wins out and she bows, closing the door and leaving him in the silence of the bathhouse. He slumps back into the water, exhaling a massive sigh of relief that his flimsy excuse actually worked. Staring at the ripples in the water, he admits to himself just how terrified he was of being trapped here forever. With a final declaration of freedom, he reaches out and presses the logout button, eager to escape the madness. As his consciousness begins to fade, a final, ominous tip appears, warning him that if his character dies while he is gone, he dies in real life. A sudden jolt of consciousness snaps his eyes open, his face contorted in a mix of terror and confusion as reality floods back. He finds himself sitting in his gaming chair, body trembling and covered in a cold sweat as if waking from a nightmare. The familiar hum of the electric fan and the sight of his cluttered room suggest that perhaps he just fell asleep from playing too long. He desperately clutches his face, laughing nervously as he tries to convince himself that entering a game world is physically impossible. But as he tries to dismiss the experience as a disgustingly vivid dream, his gaze falls upon a small object resting on his desk. His breath hitches in his throat as he picks up the golden fragment, the undeniable proof that shatters his fragile denial. He hastily shoves the piece into his pocket, his mind racing with the terrifying implication that the digital world has bled into the physical one. Turning back to his computer, he stares in horror at the monitor where the game's once stable homepage has completely vanished. A piercing scream from outside tears his attention away from the screen, freezing the blood in his veins. Through the window, he witnesses a scene from hell. A giant, insectoid monster scaling the apartment building in a blaze of fire. Below on the streets, the carnage is absolute, with civilians being slaughtered by creatures that defy all laws of biology. Police officers fire their weapons in vain, their bullets bouncing harmlessly off the exoskeleton of a colossal mantis. His phone buzzes violently on the desk, the screen lighting up with a chilling emergency alert warning of unidentified attacks across the region. He stares out the window, his mind struggling to process why the monsters from Pangea are tearing his reality apart. A massive mantis locks eyes with him through the glass, its mandibles twitching as it marks him as its next prey. Overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the apocalypse, his legs give out, and he collapses onto the floor of his room. His glasses slide down his nose as he recalls the system's ominous warning about the boundary between reality and Pangea collapsing. A holographic blue screen manifests before him, confirming that the collapse is at 7.66% and progressing rapidly. Panic begins to set in, his heart pounding against his ribs as he realizes he is utterly defenseless in the real world. His eyes dart to the golden fragment on the floor, the only anomaly that might offer a sliver of hope. Desperate for a weapon, he scrambles toward the piece, hoping against hope that the game's logic applies here too. He stares intensely at the fragment, his gamer instincts screaming that if monsters are real, items must be too. With a surge of determination, he grabs his mouse, attempting to interact with reality as if it were the game interface. A blinding light erupts from his hand, and the system responds, displaying the Sword of Michela and Soul of the High Dragon in a digital inventory. He clutches the glowing red gem, realizing that the simple double-click mechanic of the game doesn't work in the physical world. Frustration mounts as he stares at the interface, realizing he doesn't know how to trigger the item's power manually. The system window clarifies that the broken piece of the golden rule allows for synchronization, but he needs to activate it. A brilliant column of light engulfs him as he triggers the synchronization, merging his physical body with his game character, Randolph. Meanwhile, in the city streets, the air is thick with smoke and the stench of blood as corpses litter the cracked pavement. A mother runs desperately through the inferno, clutching her young daughter tight as the world crumbles around them. The child cries for her father, but the mother, breathless and terrified, promises he will be there soon to keep them moving. Above them, a massive chunk of concrete breaks loose from a damaged building, casting a deadly shadow over their escape route. The impact is devastating, sending the little girl tumbling across the debris-strewn road, separated from her mother's arms. The mother is pinned beneath the rubble, blood pouring from her head, yet she screams for her daughter to run and save herself. A young woman in business attire rushes forward, her face pale with fear as she tries to help the stranded child. But the mother knows it's too late for herself. She begs the stranger to take her child, sacrificing her last moments for her daughter's survival. The stranger grabs the crying child, pulling her away from the scene just as a monstrous shadow looms over the trapped woman. A giant, flower-like monstrosity opens its maw, descending upon the helpless mother with terrifying speed. The stranger shields the child's eyes, unable to watch the gruesome fate that is about to befall the woman who saved them. Suddenly, a sharp whistling sound cuts through the air, followed by a flash of blue energy that illuminates the dust. A massive sword cleaves through the monster's flesh, severing the creature in a single, powerful stroke. The beast is split in two, erupting in a fountain of green blood as a figure lands amidst the carnage with superheroic impact. The young woman stares in wide-eyed shock, unable to comprehend the sudden intervention that saved them from death. She clutches the child closer, tears of relief welling in her eyes as she realizes they are still alive. Standing tall amidst the smoke is a man in modern clothes but wielding a sword, looking back with a stoic expression. Before they can speak, a massive, serpentine head lunges from the smoke, its red eye glowing with predatory hunger. The woman screams a warning, but the warrior is already moving, his senses tuned to the threat behind him. With a fluid motion, he slashes upward, intercepting the monster's attack with a burst of red energy. The creature recoils, its blood spraying onto the pavement as the civilian watches the impossible battle unfold. But the threat is far from over. Immense, scaled necks rise from the smoke, revealing the creature to be a multi-headed hydra. The warrior stands fearlessly on the monster's back, telling the civilians to stay still while he handles the beast. The woman looks up, her fear replaced by awe as she witnesses a power that transcends human capability. The little girl reaches out towards the figure, seeing a savior where there was once only despair. Across the city, similar scenes play out. Ordinary people are helpless as their world is turned into a dungeon. The woman watches with bated breath, realizing that the world has changed forever in the span of a single afternoon. The warrior engages the hydra, his blade flashing as he dissects the monster with the precision of a surgeon. Narrators reveal that this phenomenon is global. From the pyramids to Paris, monsters are dismantling human civilization. However, humanity is not entirely defenseless. Awakened individuals, the players, have begun to fight back with superhuman strength. A close-up shows a gleaming piece of armor, symbolizing the return of the game's power to the real world. A charismatic player stands atop a tank, raising his sword and rallying the terrified civilians with promises of protection. He shouts about unity, broadcasting his heroism to the world through the smartphones of the survivors. Watching this broadcast on a TV in a luxury apartment, a dark-haired man scoffs at the theatrics, calling them idiots for wasting their power. He holds a golden fragment in his hand, identified by the system as the player Massacre, a top-tier ranker. He clenches his fist around the gold, declaring that in this new chaotic era, power is the only currency that matters. A holographic ranking board appears, showing the updated standings for the survival quest that just concluded. Massacre's eyes narrow as he scans the list, seeing his own name in 5th place, far below the top scorer. The name at the very top is Randolph with a staggering 220 points, a score that baffles the veteran player. Deep within the game world, the real Randolph, Park Hyun-myung, sits in a meditative pose, contemplating his next move. He deduces that when a player's strongest character dies, they are summoned to this world, explaining the influx of heroes. The system explains that while appearance changes and gear resets, the latent talents of the previous character remain. Massacre smiles fiercely in the real world, realizing that a high score implies a deep understanding of the game's mechanics. In the bathhouse, Park Hyun-myung rubs his chin, his mind connecting the dots of his past experiences in Pangenia. He realizes that the monsters appearing in reality are mirrored by players appearing in the game world. Lying back in the water, he begins to understand the true nature of the interference he faced in his previous runs. He recalls the Demon Realm expedition, a grueling quest he almost cleared with his last character. A memory surfaces of a trusted knight kneeling in defeat, surrounded by swords, a symbol of his past failure. He remembers how his hired NPC mercenaries suddenly began acting irrationally, sabotaging the mission at critical moments. It becomes clear now, those weren't glitches but other summoned players who had their own agendas. He clenches his fist in the water, realizing that the betrayal he suffered was likely the work of players like Massacre. Rising from the bath, he steps out with a renewed sense of urgency, the water dripping from his muscular frame. He knows that if he was targeted back then, his high ranking now makes him an even bigger target for rival players. Walking through the opulent halls of the palace, he reasons that since the boundary is collapsing, he is safe nowhere. He concludes that the only way to survive is to become overwhelmingly strong in the game world before the merge completes. He arrives at the throne room where the Snake Princess Isabella sits, radiating an aura of regal authority. She looks down at him, asking if he has come to fulfill his promise, to which he replies with a confident yes. However, before he can proceed, she raises a hand, stating that she has one condition for his request. Isabella's eyes widen in surprise as he interrupts her, boldly stating his own demands before she can set the terms. He declares that he wants to enter the sanctuary, a request that sounds insane given his current status. He explains his logic. If the first quest was survival, the second is obtaining a class, and he aims for the very top. The system window confirms his ambition, displaying Main Quest 2, obtain a class, verifying that the sanctuary is the key to his evolution. The bodies of the palace guards litter the cold stone floor, a gruesome testament to the violence that just occurred. Isabella cleans the blood from her blade with a cold, impassive expression, her red-streaked hair framing a face void of remorse. Park Hyun-myung watches her from behind, awestruck by the terrifying efficiency with which she slaughtered an entire squad in mere minutes. He gulps nervously, touching his own neck as he realizes that without his successful persuasion, his head would be rolling on the floor alongside the guards. Interrupting his dark thoughts, Isabella stops before a massive, ominous doorway, announcing that they have reached their destination. A set of stone stairs descends into a suffocating darkness, emanating an aura of dread that would turn back any ordinary adventurer. A system window flashes a warning, identifying the location as the hidden sanctuary of the desert, and advising that his level is far too low to survive the poison within. However, the purple miasma swirls harmlessly around him, repelled by the giant's demon resistance trait that acts as his invisible armor. He calculates his strategy, realizing that while a level 2 player has no business here, Isabella's overwhelming power makes clearing the exploration subquest easy. But as his foot hits the first step, his expression hardens, for his ambition reaches far beyond a simple exploration reward. The main quest window hovers before him, taunting him with the objective obtain a class, fueling his determination to descend into the abyss. A smirk plays on his lips as he reads the reward conditions, knowing that the tier of the class depends entirely on his performance here. His internal monologue reveals his true target. He is not here for a common profession but to seize a specific, legendary class. Suddenly, Isabella grabs him by the shoulder, halting his progress and questioning his navigation with a sharp rebuke. She points ahead with a smug grin, explaining that the bridge he was about to cross is a trap designed to sweep ignorant trespassers into the void. Leaning in close, she mocks his lack of knowledge, asking with a predatory smile if the so-called star-bearer is scared of a simple trap. But her mockery turns to genuine shock as Park suddenly grabs her waist, pulling her off balance with unexpected boldness. She flushes with a mix of anger and embarrassment, her composure cracking as she demands to know if he is challenging her authority. He smoothly lies about a leg cramp to diffuse the tension, shamelessly suggesting that she carry him since the path ahead is dangerous. Isabella looks down at him with disbelief as he squats on the ground, waiting for a piggyback ride from one of the game's deadliest assassins. She explodes in outrage, her face turning crimson as she screams at the audacity of a slave demanding to be carried by royalty. Park cuts through her protests with cold logic, reminding her that if they delay, the Queen's pursuit team will catch them and ruin everything. Defeated by his reasoning, she grumbles and hoists him onto her back, her pride taking a backseat to the urgency of their mission. Suddenly, Park commands her to run, but instead of following the bridge, he directs her toward the empty void, causing her to scream in panic. They sprint toward the edge of the cliff, Isabella yelling that there is absolutely no path where he is guiding them. Despite her protests, they plunge off the edge, plummeting straight into the dark, swirling abyss below. As they fall, Park's eye ignites with a neon blue light, signaling the activation of his mutant hidden trait. The world shifts in his vision, peeling back the layer of reality to reveal geometric structures that are invisible to the naked eye. He guides their fall perfectly, and they land with a heavy thud on a platform that exists only for those who can see the unseen. Isabella stares at the empty space beneath her boots, completely baffled by how he knew of a secret path that even she, a commander, was unaware of. Her suspicion deepens as she notices that despite the heavy demonic energy saturating the air, this low-level slave isn't even short of breath. Park breaks her train of thought with a teasing remark about her fear of heights, earning a sharp command to shut his mouth. She tightens her grip on him, her mind racing with the impossibility of his knowledge and his unnatural calmness in the face of death. Unable to contain her curiosity, she stares intently into his eyes and asks the question haunting her. "Have we met before?" Park ignores the question, dismounting and walking up the glowing, ethereal stairs that have revealed themselves before them. He raises his hand, letting the magical energy flow around his fingers, and speaks a riddle. "It means I have seen you." The light intensifies, casting long shadows as he finishes his thought with a melancholic truth. "But you have never seen me." The blinding light fades, replaced by a serene, grassy hillside where the two of them lie, safe from the abyss. Park explains that they have passed through a domain barrier, a magical filter that hides the true sanctuary from the unworthy. As flower petals drift on the wind, his gaze sharpens, his memory telling him that the first trial is about to begin. Deep within the rock face, a single red eye snaps open, glowing with ancient, mechanical malice. From the shadows of the sanctuary, hulking stone shapes begin to stir, their red eyes igniting one by one in the darkness. A massive golem rises from the earth, a molten core burning in its chest like a miniature sun. Park analyzes the threat instantly, recognizing the rune on its chest as the mark of an upper-tier guardian that can one-shot him. He turns to Isabella with a grin, cheekily asking if her leg cramp has healed enough for a fight. Before she can retort, a massive stone fist crashes down, obliterating the ground where they stood just a split second ago. The golem roars, its rocky body towering over them, an obstacle that brute force alone cannot easily overcome. Isabella wastes no time, leaping into the air with her daggers drawn, a blur of motion against the bright light of the golem's core. Her eyes narrow with lethal focus, as she declares that this battle will end before it even truly begins. She descends like a red lightning bolt, striking the golem's weak points with such speed that the stone giant begins to crumble mid-attack. Park watches with a satisfied smile, marveling at the sheer absurdity of an assassination character destroying a tank-type monster. The golem disintegrates into glowing fragments, unable to withstand the overwhelming difference in stats. Isabella lands gracefully amidst the debris, proving that level 8 is not just a number, but a realm of power. As the dust settles, a blue system window materializes in front of Park, startling him. The system offers him the Golem Maker class, revealing that because they are traveling together, it counts her kills as his own. He contemplates the offer, acknowledging that summoner-type classes are rare and highly versatile in Pingenia. He knows that Golem Maker is a high-tier class that many players would kill to obtain this early in the game. However, with a resolute expression, he presses the decline button, rejecting a prize that would satisfy anyone else. The ground begins to tremble again, dark purple shadows rising from the earth like ominous smoke. Isabella senses the shift in the atmosphere, spinning around with her dagger raised as a new, far greater threat emerges. The purple energy swirls violently, coalescing into a terrifying shape that dwarfs the previous golems. A system message announces the awakening of the ancient king, the true master of the mountain buried by the nameless star. Park looks up into the swirling darkness, his face serious, acknowledging that the entity he truly came for has arrived. A colossal serpentine head with glowing purple eyes descends from the shadows, radiating a divine and terrifying pressure. Park and Isabella stand side by side, tiny figures facing the majestic and lethal form of the ancient king, Dramut. A final warning flashes red, screaming that the player's level is woefully insufficient for the level 10 challenge that now looms over them. The sheer weight of the ancient king's aura descends upon him, crushing the air from his lungs and leaving him breathless. High above, the mountain guardian coils around the sky, its massive form blotting out the sun like a god of this domain. He turns to Isabella with a forced, trembling smile, jokingly asking if she expects him to fight that monstrosity alone. Before she can answer, the serpent attacks, and its massive tail crashes down with earth-shattering force, exposing his lie instantly. Isabella is sent tumbling across the ground, barely evading the shockwave that rips the earth apart in her wake. He stands frozen amidst the debris with an awkward grin, realizing his description of the beast as gentle was dead wrong. Isabella glares back at him, her face twisted in a mix of shock and homicidal rage at his dangerous deception. He stares at the beast in genuine confusion, wondering why the friendly guide from his memories has turned into a mindless monster. The serpent hisses a challenge that vibrates through their bones, demanding the intruders prove their qualification through combat. Isabella screams at him, demanding an explanation for why the guardian she was promised is trying to obliterate them. Her words are drowned out by another cataclysmic strike that forces her to dance along the edge of death to survive. As she frantically dodges the relentless assault, she screams for orders, while he desperately racks his brain for why the timeline has changed. A sudden realization strikes him like a lightning bolt, widening his eyes as the missing piece of the puzzle falls into place. He recalls the deep lore of Dramut, an enchanted beast that grew wise by feeding on the spiritual energy of the star. In his past life, he cleared this sanctuary using Wilhelm, a character who had already reached the pinnacle of power at level 10. Because Wilhelm was a transcended being, the snake recognized his strength immediately and guided him obediently to the prize. The logic is brutal but simple. Dramut respects power, and he attacks anyone weaker than him without mercy. He bites his thumb in frustration, realizing that as a level 2 weakling, he is currently viewed as prey, not a master. Meanwhile, Isabella is fighting for her life, thrown through the air like a ragdoll by the Guardian's overwhelming power. She skids across the dirt, her legendary assassin skills barely keeping her alive against a god-tier monster. Gasping for air, she realizes the sanctuary's poison is finally taking its toll, making every movement agonizingly slow. The massive head of Dramut lowers, its red eye glowing as it questions if its assessment of the star-bearer was a mistake. Just as the final, lethal blow descends, a commanding voice cuts through the chaos, ordering the beast to halt. To Isabella's disbelief, the colossal serpent freezes mid-strike, its body recoiling at the sheer authority of the command. The giant red eye narrows, focusing its intense, ancient gaze on the tiny human who dared to give an order. In the serpent's vision, the silhouette of the current intruder momentarily overlaps with the memory of an ancient master. He steps forward with the swagger of a king, boldly claiming to be the return of its former master, Wilhelm. The great snake hesitates, its tongue flicking as it tries to reconcile this weak human with the legendary hero it once served. But the hesitation is short-lived, replaced by a booming, mocking laughter that shakes the very ground beneath them. The creature mocks his weakness, pointing out that he is even feebler than the stone golems outside, let alone a transcendent. It fondly remembers Wilhelm as a perfect human specimen, the only one worthy of being called its master. But it knows the truth. Wilhelm failed his expedition and his star fell, signifying a permanent, irreversible death. Enraged by the impersonation of its dead master, the beast opens its maw to devour the liar whole. Yet, facing annihilation, he does not flinch, standing his ground with an unnatural stillness amidst the killing intent. Instead of begging, he speaks a single, powerful phrase: "Honor the contract we made, Dramut." The massive jaws snap shut just inches from his face, the sheer wind pressure blowing him back but leaving him unharmed. Confusion replaces rage in the beast's eyes as it pulls back, demanding to know how a stranger knows of the secret pact. He simply smirks, his confidence stemming from the encyclopedic knowledge of a hardcore gamer who knows every secret. He recites the terms of the hidden contract. Whoever possesses the star learns the Guardian's true name and becomes its master. Most importantly, the contract is bound by a curse of death if its secrets are ever revealed to an outsider. Internally, he breathes a sigh of relief, thankful that the game's lore mechanics are functioning perfectly in reality. Since he is physically Randolph but spiritually the player who created the contract, the curse's penalty creates a loophole he can exploit. The serpent pulls back, unnerved by this anomaly, and demands to know the true identity of the intruder. He refuses to answer directly, instead commanding the beast to take him to the star so the truth can be proven. Dramut issues a grave warning, stating that the star burns the unworthy to ash the moment they approach it. He counters with a sharp taunt, asking if the snake is simply afraid that a new master will rise and claim it. The beast scoffs at his arrogance, seeing only a frail boy who looks like he would crumble from a single bite. However, bound by curiosity and the ancient contract, the Guardian agrees to lead him to his potential doom. It decides that letting the star incinerate the impostor is a more fitting punishment than eating him, and turns to lead the way. Isabella watches in stunned silence, unable to comprehend how he tamed a god-tier monster with words alone. They arrive at the heart of the sanctuary, where a massive stone altar towers into the dark, purple sky. He explains to Isabella that the object resting atop that pillar is the source of all the sanctuary's power. There, resting in ominous silence on a magical seal, lies a pristine white skull radiating an ancient energy. He clarifies that this is no ordinary bone, but the star, which is actually the face of the fallen goddess Li. Legend says that when the twin goddess died, her divinity was shattered into 32 fragments across the continent. These scattered pieces of a deity are what the people of this world revere as stars, capable of granting transcendence. Without hesitation, he climbs the altar and takes the skull in his hands, holding the key to his evolution. A sudden, intense heat radiates from the artifact, illuminating his face with a dangerous, blinding red glow. Isabella screams in panic as a torrent of magical fire erupts from the skull, engulfing him completely. The giant snake watches with sadistic pleasure, mocking the fool who thought he could handle divine power without consequence. Inside the inferno, he grits his teeth against the searing pain, cursing the beast's arrogance while holding on tight. He knows the secret mechanism. The star only kills if you try to bypass the Guardian to steal it, which he did not do. Since he passed Dramat's test, survival is guaranteed. The only question remaining is whether he gets the class he wants. As he squeezes, cracks begin to form on the skull's surface, a phenomenon he has only ever heard of in rumors. The bone shatters into light, revealing the essence hidden within, the attribute of void. A chaotic storm of his existing hidden traits swirls around him, merging with the new energy in a brilliant display. A cosmic voice echoes in his mind, acknowledging him as the one who stands before destruction. The flames die down, revealing him unharmed and radiating a majestic, multicolored aura of newfound power. System messages cascade rapidly, confirming that his mana has converted to star energy and he has acquired the class Star Successor. Isabella's pupil trembles as she witnesses the impossible. A human absorbing the divinity of a star and surviving. Bathed in divine light, he turns to her and asks a question that will define their future. What does she want? Still dazed, she answers honestly, stating her desire to leave the desert and find her lost family bloodline. He smiles, offering to grant her wish and bless her freedom, but only under one condition. He demands 1 year of absolute servitude, after which he promises to help her reclaim her lineage. He extends his hand, his voice carrying the weight of a king as he declares that, unlike the queen, he does not lie. Overwhelmed by his power and the promise of freedom, the proud snake princess drops to her knee in submission. He looks down at his new subordinate with satisfaction, praising her for making the wise choice. He then turns his attention to the massive serpent watching from the shadows, addressing it by name. The once arrogant ancient king now stammers, terrified by the aura of the new star successor standing before him. A system window pops up, tallying a staggering 230 points and confirming his dominance in the Hall of Fame. The feat is so great that even the distant, combat-oriented constellations begin to watch his journey with interest. Far away in the Desert Queen's palace, the doors creak open as Isabella returns, not with a corpse but with a master. The morning sun casts a blinding glare over the modern city streets, masking the supernatural storm brewing beneath the surface. Inside a bustling cafe, a group of top-tier players discusses the anomaly named Randolph, convinced he must be the legendary Phantom. The men lean in, their competitive spirits ignited as they plot to make contact before any other guild can snatch him up. The female player sips her drink with a bored expression, skeptical that a ghost like him can be easily found. One suggests a devious tactic, reasoning that since Phantom is now a real player, he can be lured out through the newly opened secret auction hall. She considers the plan, realizing that to maintain his rank in the next main quest, he will desperately need high-level equipment. The strategy is explained, baiting a trap by listing a high-quality item at a low price to lure the target in. Once a newbie buys the bait, a tracking talisman attached to the item reveals their location, leading to robbery or murder. However, the man hesitates, wondering if a veteran like Phantom would actually fall for such a transparent and beginner-level trap. His companion counters that even experts have needs, and the allure of power might blind him to the obvious danger. The girl's demeanor shifts to manic excitement, thrilled by the decisiveness of a player who would initiate a grand expedition despite past failures. Their scheming is interrupted by a phone call, the caller ID prompting a joke about reporting a stalker. As they answer, they muse about Randolph's real-world identity, imagining him as a CEO or a wealthy heir to match his in-game prowess. Elsewhere, a holographic interface reveals a brutal update. The player Massacre has been stripped of his rights and banned from the auction. A hand tightens around the screen in fury, unable to comprehend how another player amassed enough points to displace him. The man known as Massacre sits in the gloom of his apartment, dismissing the setback with a terrifyingly calm arrogance. His confidence stems from a history of violence, where he climbed the ranks not by skill, but by slaughtering anyone in his path. He vows that this setback is temporary, promising to regain his standing by simply killing whoever dares to rank above him. Back in the game world, a cheerful notification announces the completion of the Sanctuary Exploration subquest. Park Hyun-myung and Isabella plummet from the sky, accompanied by the rewards of a perfect clear, including an epic-grade teleport book. Moments later, they are riding comfortably atop the massive serpent Dramut, with Park issuing navigation commands like a GPS. As they travel, a satisfying light envelops him, signaling another level up accumulated from the earlier battles. He checks his status, pleased to reach level 3, though he notes the progression is significantly slower for his unique class. The system explains the trade-off. Possessing numerous high-tier talents increases the experience required to level up by tenfold. Despite the grind, he accepts the penalty, knowing that the superior stat growth he receives in return is worth the extra effort. Sitting cross-legged on the monster's head, he grins as he thinks about the other treasure he secured during the quest. Isabella watches him from behind, perplexed by his sudden good mood and the strange items he seems to be cataloging. He focuses on the shadow cloak, a reward that grants invisibility, essentially giving him a free stealth skill for future encounters. Suddenly, the giant serpent's pupil contracts, sensing a disturbance in the magical barrier surrounding its territory. Ethereal figures glide through the air above, signaling that the sanctuary's isolation has been breached by outside forces. Dramat's deep voice resonates, warning his master that intruders have been detected entering the sanctuary grounds. Park and Isabella snap to attention, the sudden warning shattering the peaceful atmosphere of their ride. Isabella immediately deduces the identity of the interlopers, realizing the Queen's pursuit squad has finally caught up to them. Her expression darkens as she assesses the threat, knowing that even without the Queen, the squad possesses overwhelming military power. Park remains unfazed, reasoning that since they are riding the sanctuary's guardian, they have the ultimate advantage. With a command, he orders Dramat to intercept the enemies, using the giant beast as a living barricade while they make their escape. The colossal serpent hisses in acknowledgement, its eyes glowing with lethal intent as it turns to fulfill its duty. Park and Isabella leap from the creature's back, landing on the stone bridge as the giant sea serpent prepares to engage the invaders. They sprint away from the looming battle, Isabella taking the lead while trusting Park's assurance that the Queen is absent. Park calculates their odds, knowing that if they get bogged down here, the main force will surround them and cut off all escape routes. Isabella glances back, relieved to realize that he isn't abandoning the Guardian out of cruelty, but out of tactical necessity. He explains the plan as they run. They will head for the warp gate at the desert's edge, which is now accessible since her curse is lifted. He skids to a halt, his boots kicking up dust as a critical limitation of the escape plan crosses his mind. The massive stone archway looms ahead, dormant and silent, requiring a significant amount of time to charge up before it can be used. He turns to Isabella, clarifying that while this is their exit, they are sitting ducks during the activation process. When she asks for the time frame, his grim expression reveals that they need to hold their ground for half a day. He peers over the edge of the cliff, noting the lack of cover and hoping Dramat can buy them enough time before they are spotted. He tells her that he must use this downtime to communicate with the star, a convenient lie to cover his need to log out. Isabella steps forward with fierce loyalty, drawing her weapon and vowing to protect him with her life while he meditates. Assured of his safety, he initiates the logout sequence, his consciousness fading from the digital realm as the system issues a final warning. Park Hyun-myung wakes up in his bed, the morning light filtering through the window as he returns to the mundane world. He sits up groggily, his body heavy and disoriented as he tries to shake off the sensory dissonance of switching realities. His hand instinctively reaches for his smartphone, checking the time and the state of the world he left behind. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, he confirms that the monster invasion hasn't fully started yet, giving him a brief window of peace. However, he knows the merger of dimensions is accelerating, and he must balance his growth in the game with intelligence gathering in reality. A sudden chime from his phone interrupts his strategic planning, drawing his attention to the screen. He stares at the screen in confusion, seeing the name Kim Seo-yeon, his ex-girlfriend who brutally dumped him, flashing on the display. Memories of their toxic relationship surface, recalling how she used him for money and belittled him before moving on to a richer man. The memory shifts to their breakup, where she coldly dismissed him, refusing to even offer a proper explanation for her cruelty. Annoyed by her audacity, his thumb hovers over the decline button, wondering who she thinks she is to call him now. The scene cuts to a cafe where Seo-yeon waits impatiently, checking her phone and looking irritated that he hasn't arrived yet. Internally, she justifies her actions, thinking that while he was pathetic, he was obedient, and perhaps she should have milked him a bit longer. Her internal monologue is cut short as Park arrives, and she instantly plasters a fake, welcoming smile on her face. She greets him enthusiastically, acting as if nothing happened, while he stands there in his tracksuit, looking unimpressed and asking why she called. He refuses to sit, standing over her with a newfound confidence and demanding she get to the point so he can leave. She suppresses a scoff at his attitude, thinking that his stubborn pride hasn't changed, but she decides to play along. Leaning forward to emphasize her figure, she touches his arm and claims that his pride was something she always liked about him. She looks up with practiced puppy dog eyes, lying through her teeth about realizing how good he was to her after they broke up. Park stares down at her through his glasses, his expression unreadable as she asks the manipulative question, "Didn't you miss me?" Ignoring her emotional plea entirely, his mind focuses on a trivial detail, whether he should order a drink or not. He notices the one drink per person sign and realizes she called him here but didn't even have the decency to buy him a coffee. Disgusted by her cheapness and transparency, he simply turns around and starts walking away without a word. Seoyin panics, her facade crumbling as she grabs his arm, screaming that she missed him and asking if he's still mad about the breakup. He stops and looks back over his shoulder, asking coldly if her current boyfriend knows she is meeting her ex. Her face goes pale with genuine fear, realizing he knows about her double life and her social media activity. Desperate, she chases after him as he walks out, begging him to listen, her voice rising in hysteria. Walking away, Park realizes that in the past he would have crumbled, but Randolph's strength is bleeding into reality, making him calm and detached. Walking away from the cafe, his attention is suddenly diverted by a violent commotion erupting in the crowded street behind him. He turns to witness a disturbing scene where a crazed man is holding a box cutter, threatening a terrified victim while screaming at the onlookers. Consumed by a psychotic rage and feeling judged by the crowd, the attacker snaps and swings the blade down with lethal intent. The weapon descends in a blur, but before it can strike flesh, Park steps in, catching the attacker's wrist with a thunderous impact. The victim, a young girl frozen in terror, looks up in disbelief at the stranger's hand that has shielded her from certain death. Park stares coldly at the attacker, his grip crushing the man's wrist until the weapon drops, proving that while he returned to reality, the warrior's strength came with him.